नमस्कार, सत श्री अकाल, राम राम सा, खंबा गणी वड़क्कम। आप सभी का ऑल्टरनेट वीडियो में फिर से स्वागत है। We have PVR Narasimha Rao once again with us, and the reason I got sir because the world is going in a turmoil. It is literally like sitting on a volcano, and we don't know where the situation is heading. The Europe is in crisis, and all those points. So I'll straight away take you to sir. Sir, the Israel-Gaza war is only intensifying, and how do we see it going from there? Yes, sir. Over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, as you said, world is in a turmoil, but to put things in perspective, I don't really think this is really the peak or anything close to the peak. I'm afraid this is very early stages of what I talked about earlier as a war that is almost guaranteed to take place in 2030, 2031 timeframe, because there are planetary combinations in the 2030, late 2030 time period, which are similar to the combinations at the time of the Mahabharata war. And it's very likely that there'll be a major war. And major wars don't happen suddenly. There are several events that lead up to them. So, for example, Russia's invasion of Ukraine developed one front where the US NATO alliance is fighting the China Russia alliance. And as I said in the past, China, Russia, and also Iran and North Korea, these will become closer and closer through this decade. And that will be one axis that will be taking part in the major war that is coming in 2030. And on the other side, it will be US, Israel, NATO, and also India getting involved. So this will be the other side, and that will be the winning side. This is why I mentioned in the past that India should strengthen the relations with the US without ditching USSR, because strategically we have a long relationship with USSR. So India should not get out of that partnership, but slowly strengthen the US partnership, because at some stage Russia will pick China ahead of India, because there is another, though Russia is a friend, India and China are really enemies. So there will be a stage where there will be several wars developing in the world, and Russia needs China more than India. And around that time, India will have to have a strong relationship with US so that they can be independent of USSR, Russia. Sorry, there's no USSR anymore. So India has been doing that really admirably. Sri Jaishankar has been navigating the international politics very well. And now, on that note, I'm very glad that Indian government has taken a firm stand for Israel, even though one can make an argument for the suffering of Palestinian people, especially as the war progresses. The suffering of the Palestinian people will come to the front, and there will be some media outcry about it. But in the war that will develop through this decade and peak in the 2030 timeframe, Israel will be on the winning side, and India is destined to fight alongside US and Israel. So it is very good that India is standing firmly with a hand of friendship extended to Israel. Now, coming to the actual situation in the Middle East, I think last May or so, or maybe this May, I did an interview with the alternate media channel, and I mentioned that the long-term prospects of the Middle East are bad. When you asked me about the future of Islam, I said that I don't have a basis to predict for religion, but looking at those countries, the long-term charts as well as the annual charts of those countries, I see a lot of suffering, lot of chaos and turbulence in those countries in this time frame, in this decade. And when there is a major war in the 2030 time frame, those countries will really suffer, and Islam may basically face serious challenges in global challenges as well as from within, basically, as the governments that rule these countries become weak. The people who are more logically oriented and more agnostically oriented, they will revolt against some of the tight control over the religious leaders on politics. So overall, over the next decade, the countries in the Middle East will face a lot of challenges. And as far as Israel itself is concerned, even though I said that they will end up on the winning side in a major war that will slowly develop over this decade, they have a really troublesome decade ahead. Right now, there is a lot of support for them, whether it is from India or USA. There is a lot of support for Israel. But the thing is, if you go back to 9/11, when 9/11 happened, when US invaded Afghanistan and later they had the military action in Iraq because they believed that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. There was a lot of public support initially, but it slowly withered away. And also, those wars seemed to end in a positive result very quickly. But slowly, the opposition became stronger. Basically, they went into hiding, kept fighting guerrilla wars, and there was support from outside actors. And then it ended up dragging on for a long time, and then ended up basically with an embarrassment for US. Similarly, looking at Israel's long-term charts as well as the annual charts over the next several years, I'm afraid that Israel will be very successful in the short term in this war, but in the long term, this will drag on. Even though it may seem like they are winning very easily, there may be outside actors who will support their enemies, and also multiple enemies can collude as this war drags on. I'm afraid that even though this may start as an attack on Gaza, an invasion of Gaza to basically cleanse Gaza of Hamas may go into hiding, and they may, just like Al Qaeda did in Afghanistan, but there may also be other forces getting involved. I'm afraid that, based on the annual charts, I'm afraid that Lebanon may also get involved. The terrorist force there, I think, is called Hezbollah. Hezbollah, with Iran support, may also get involved in this war slowly. And also, I'm afraid, looking at Jordan's annual charts, Jordan may also get involved in this war in the next couple of years. So this may end up being a multi-front war that Israel has to fight with several nations. And then I'm afraid that the Iran-Russia axis that I mentioned, China-Russia-Iran axis, they may covertly support these forces that are fighting against Israel. And just like the Ukraine-Russia war, it started as Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but slowly it developed into a proxy war between China-Russia axis and US. So it's basically a proxy war between China and US. Similarly, I'm afraid this war over the next few years will, even though it may seem to end quickly, it will actually drag on, and it will end up developing into a proxy war between US and NATO on one side, which will be supporting Israel, and then the Russia, China, Iran, North Korea axis. They may be giving a lot of indirect support, tactical support, and even some covert operational support to the terrorists, Hamas and Hezbollah terrorists, as well as some groups. I don't even know the names yet, but some groups may come up in Jordan and they may basically attack Israel from the Jordan border. So there is a lot of chaos and turbulence that is unfortunately staring at Israel in the coming decade. But unfortunately, some people may say, we want peace, let's go for peace, etc. But as I said so many times in the past, this decade is not a decade of peace. This decade is a decade of war. But what we should hope for is not really peace, but we should hope for sustainable peace, dharmic peace. The peace that we had in the last few decades in the world is not really sustainable, and it's not based on dharma. It is basically neither righteous nor sustainable. So, what we should hope for and pray for is the peace that will come in 2030s after the major war that I mentioned, which is almost inevitable. The peace that will dawn on earth will be a more sustainable peace that is based on the principles of dharma, righteousness, and balance. So, I mean, I don't want to be very pessimistic, but in the short term, for the next few years, I am pessimistic that there will be any peace. This is another front. Ukraine is one front in this war between these two axes that I mentioned: US, NATO, Israel, India is one axis. Of course, all the players may not yet be involved, but eventually that will be one axis. And China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea is the other axis. So one front in the fight between these two axes is the Ukraine war, and this Middle East war is unfortunately or fortunately going to develop the next front. And towards 2030, closer to 2030, in probably late 2020s, another front will open in the Southeast Asia, and that will be the most dangerous one, most critical one. So basically, with the Middle East and the Eurasia, and then finally Southeast Asia, all the fronts opening, that will set the stage for the big confrontation between the superpowers in 2030.
Sir, this is setting the stage for something bigger, as you said, World War III in 2029-30. But at the same time, I'm looking at another major thing which is brewing inside. It's boiling inside. That is towards China. And for the viewers, I'm telling them, hold on. We have some very important questions. We are just trying to put the pieces together so that so we can take the story towards the end. So China, people are talking that China is going to disintegrate, and probably that's another reason the world is boiling right now. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, this is actually my long-standing prediction for many years that China in the period 2020 to 2036, during that period, China will disintegrate and at least become five parts. And but the thing is, I don't think it's happening anytime soon. People may look at the financial problems, the economic troubles in China, and think that it is imminent. I don't believe it is imminent. China is a strong power, strong military power, strong global power with presence in many countries. And my expectation is through this decade, China will actually increase their strength, whereas US may become weaker and weaker through infighting, through political disturbance, domestic political disturbance. US will become weaker. They'll be more indecisive during this decade, whereas China will be more decisive. China will be stronger, and their influence across the world will increase further. But the thing is, it will rise so high that it will become overconfident to engage in this confrontation with US towards late 20s, and basically resulting in this major war in 2030-31 timeframe. But as a result of that war, and also as a result of all the economic tensions uh, reaching a peak through this decade, through all these confrontations, all these machinations of various countries, and also the thing is, all these fronts in the war that are opening up, they will have an impact on the economy, world economy. So all these things will basically combine to create a lot of unrest within China. And if you look at China, the stability that is within China is like a pack of cards. The It's not like people in China are really happy. They're happy with the economy. They're happy with their lives. But when basically that is no longer guaranteed, all the unrest that has piled up over decades will just explode. And the control the Communist Party of China has over China will collapse. But my time frame for that is in the 2030s, not necessarily. Though I said in the past between 2020 and 2036, I never really pin down a time. Even now, I don't want to do that. But the thing is, it will be in 2030s, not it will be after the war and not before the war. The analogy I want to give is China of today is similar to Germany of 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, etc. It was basically rising as a superpower, as a military power, and it was threatening to overtake UK. UK was the unquestioned superpower of the world at the time, and Germany was challenging to overtake UK and become the new number one country in the world, and also overtake much of Europe. And similarly, not necessarily in the same military way, but China is expanding across Asia, Africa, South America, taking over, not necessarily occupying like Germany wanted to do at that time, but this is more subtle basically in terms of in economic terms, with both economic and military presence. China is trying to do what Germany tried to do in 1930s, and US of today is like the UK of 1930s and 1940s. It was basically a superpower that is spread thin and also becoming weaker and weaker, and that is basically what is happening right now. So just like Germany before the World War II ended, and even through World War II, part of World War II, Germany seemed so dominant in the world. Similarly, I expect that China will continue his dominance in the world, and it will become more and more assertive of that dominance, assertive of his power, more and more self-confident. But the thing is, at some stage, that self-confidence will cross over into overconfidence, and then they will end up chewing more than biting more, chewing more than what they can swallow, and then that basically when things will uh, reach a point of no return for China. But I don't expect a breakup of China within this decade, within the next few years certainly, but it is definitely happening before 2036, in my opinion.
Interesting. And so next to China is our own Bharat. How are you seeing when all these political things are going on? Because one is Israel. If I look at the world map, this is somewhere Israel. Now we have
Yeah.
covered China, now India, and then we'll definitely come to the later part of the world. Gee. Will we be able to fight Hamas like forces that are raising its head in India? And they are in multiple places.
Yeah. Fortunately for us, we are in a much better position than, let's say, Israel is. Israel is surrounded by all these countries that are hostile to it, and some of them even believe, whether they officially state it or not. Some of them may even officially state it, but some of them do believe that Israel has no right to exist. They basically don't believe in a state for Jews there. So compared to them, India has a much better position, in my opinion. But the thing is, at the same time, the challenge for India is the the forces that are basically that want to wage a jihad against India, and basically they want to go back to the old days when there were forces, there were rulers who were basically happy to convert India to a different religion, basically to suppress and oppress the rights of Hindus. So they want to go back to those times when Mughals ruled India. They basically are, before Mughals, there were other rulers that ruled India. So they want to go back to those times, and those forces are there, and those forces are uh, do receive support from external agents and outside actors, foreign actors. But the thing is, one of the major forces working for the disintegration of India was Pakistan historically. And I expect that over the coming decade, Pakistan will become weaker and weaker. So of course, when a country becomes weak, when a nuclear power becomes weak, they will, as a last ditch effort, they will increase their efforts to basically target their neighbors. So Pakistan disintegrating is not really great news for India in the short term. It can basically increase the challenge. But the thing is, if you just persist, after a while, they will basically below the threshold for being able to make any difference for the operations that are in India. So Pakistan, I expect over the next decade will become so weak that they will be a non-factor. And the other foreign actor that was supporting Pakistan implicitly was US. US was an ally of Pakistan, whereas India used to be an ally of Russia in the Cold War time. So old habits die hard. So there are some forces within the deep state, and also some forces within the ruling government that basically want to weaken India. Even though the way global politics works is, even though somebody is your friend, you don't want them to become too strong. You want to basically keep them in check. So you do help their enemies that are working from within. So there will be some forces within US who are openly as well as secretly aiding these forces that are working for the disintegration of India, who are trying to weaken India. So that will continue in spite of the growing bonhomie between Indian and US governments. Under the hood, these activities will continue because this is how geopolitics works. It's not like you just flip a switch and everybody starts being good to you, because you want to be good as well as you want to be bad at the same time. So, but the thing is, over this decade, the Indo-US relationship will transform to such a level that all these forces within the deep state of US that are covertly supporting these elements will slowly become weaker and weaker. Their funding will become lesser and lesser, and this activity will start to dry up. But the thing is, I do expect that in the next few years there is a challenge to India. But luckily for India, there is a huge Muslim population in India, and there are a lot of Muslim leaders in India who are not really supportive of this kind of activities. There is a certain percentage of the population that secretly admires these activities and wants to support, but a significant percentage of leaders, especially among the Pasmanda Muslim community, they don't want these activities, and they do want to support development and basically don't support terrorism. And what we need is, though they don't have a lot of voice, it is basically the people like OIC who have voice. So what BJP and the rulers of India need to do is enable these leaders, enable these moderate Muslim leaders who stand up against terrorism in the name of Islam and Quran, and basically make them more prominent and make them become the face of Muslims in India, because the Muslim population of India is really large and it will remain. So what you need to do is strengthen the moderate aspect of Muslims and weaken the aggressive interpretation, and also those who are intent on disintegrating India. And I do expect that through this decade, as chaos uh, brews across the world, Indians will become more and more appreciative of the relatively stable environment that they are able to live in, and people will fall in line, and there'll be more patriotism. The nationalism towards an idea of India or Bharat will basically increase over this decade, and especially as we prepare towards this war in the late 2020s, India will really rise. India's prominence in the world will really be on the rise, and Indians' sense of self-respect, self-esteem, and pride will really increase. And this identity of Bharat as a tolerant nation where various religions coexist happily, that will really become strong. But the thing is, that will be rooted in sadhana dharma rather than appeasement of one minority and tolerating the oppression of the majority. It will be basically majority will get their due. At the same time, minorities will not be oppressed, and then any voices that are trying to uh, cause some discontent in the minorities with this narrative that minorities are being oppressed in India will be dispelled by voices from within minority. So I expect that all this is already happening, but on a really small scale. It's not visible. What you see outside India is the narrative that India has oppression of minorities. So this narrative will shift. There will be more positive narratives about India towards the end of this decade. Particularly 2027, 28, 29, that time period is really a great time for India. And India will be positioned for playing a major role in the war that is going to come up. So I am concerned. I think Indians should not let God, Indian government should not drop the guard. But I am optimistic that things will pan out well for India through this decade.
Sir, there are two very small questions I would like. Are we going to get control of our temples? And will the Constitution of India change? Because a lot of people are working behind the scenes for reforming the Constitution. Because that is the place from where the authority for all the power to the government, to the Supreme Court, to the executive, to the other bodies, autonomous bodies, starts from. Yes, sir.
My expectation is I will actually try to cover this in a video dedicated to India. Basically, the last 1,000 years and the next 200 years. I'll talk about India at 1,200 based on a 1,200-year chart for India. So I'll try to talk about it in more detail. But in a nutshell, my expectation is there will be slow progress in the next few years. The focus will more be on uh, development, financial, economic development of India, and keeping India safe in a really turbulent world, keeping India relatively prosperous in a world that is struggling. That will be the focus rather than Hindu agendas. For example, freeing of the temples. Temples have been, because all these laws were made during Islamic rule, later during British rule. Basically, when other religions were oppressing Hindus, all these rules were made, and they made into the constitution. They made into the laws. So some of the laws are really anti-Hindu, and I do expect changes, but I don't expect in the next couple of years. When Yogi Adityanath becomes the Prime Minister of India in mid 2020s, mid to late 2020s. That is when we start seeing a lot of progress. Not because he's the right person, but because uh, around that time the right environment will be there. All the other things, Sri Narendra Modi's focus is more on development of all Indians, not just Hindus, but development of all Indians. And during Yogi's time, India will have made so much progress materially that you can address some of these long-standing issues. Particularly in the 27, 28, 29 time frame, I expect that there will be more progress along these lines of freeing Hindu temples and basically stopping the minority appeasement and giving due rights to the majority instead of suppressing them in the name that you are majority. You want to be pro-minority. So all that equality, real equality will come in the late 2020s in my opinion. So for a few years, it will be on the back burner. There will be some slow progress, but it will relatively be on the back burner. And it's not really a bad idea because there are bigger fish to fry right now for India as a country.
Right. So I'll move on to Europe now because as this Israel Hamas thing is going on, Europe is also churning. In fact, today, this is, I think, I have seen tidbits where the Europeans have started coming out now. Today, British patriots came and they opposed these Hamas supporters. I mean, there was fist fight and they were fighting also, and police was also engaging with them. Do you think this immigrant and these people who have gone to Europe will they be able to take over Europe in coming years, or will Europe be able to fight back?
I do not think that there is any takeover of Europe by any immigrants who came in the last few decades. Europe will be Europe, but the mundane charts, the long-term charts as well as the short-term charts do suggest a period of great turmoil for Europe. So all these forces within Europe, the liberal wings and the conservative wings, the left wing and right wing in various countries will have strong collisions in their ideologies, and also some of the demographic change that happened in the last couple of decades because of these Afghanistan war, Iraq war, and fight against ISIS, etc. These will play out, and I do expect that there will be huge turmoil, whether it's France, whether it's Germany, or even UK. All these top countries of Europe, they will really struggle over the coming decade. They will also play a role in the 2030, 2031 war, but the thing is, they will not be as prominent. It will be mostly US, Israel, and India, the top players on one side, and Europe basically going along with them. And then, like I said, Iran, North Korea, China, Russia on the other side. So Europe will be a weak power. It was already like becoming weaker in their power through late 1900s. But I think during this decade, they'll become even weaker. And there'll be a lot of inner fighting, internal fight, and all these divisive forces that have crept into Europe over the last couple of decades. They will receive some domestic support. Domestic left wings will support them, and the right wings will firmly oppose them. But they will also take up some agenda items which are considered kind of bigoted. So basically, the population will be split between these two ideologies. Neither side will be perfect. Both sides will have some good points, but both sides will have some ugly points. So it will be people will be torn, and there won't be any clear majorities. So public opinion will basically be divided, and these countries will struggle to find a clear direction. They'll be swinging from one direction to another direction and become weaker and weaker.
Yeah. So coming to Canada, we have had so many talks on Canada recently because of how Justin Trudeau has behaved what do you say, in an unparliamentary way. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't want to make any subjective comments. Subjective. I don't want to share my subjective views. But the thing is, based on Justin Trudeau's horoscope, he has a really bad transits. At the time when all this unfolded, he had really bad transits. Saturn was aspecting his lagna exactly, and his moon was being transited by a couple of problematic planets. So basically, he had this is a really bad time for him. He will really struggle. And even if you ignore Trudeau as a person, if you look at the countries themselves, if you look at the India's long-term charts as well as annual charts and compare them with Canada's charts, Canada is not really a major power as they may imagine themselves to be. They're actually because they're a neighbor of US and had a historically strong relation with US. That's why they may think that they're relevant on the world scene. They're not really that relevant in geopolitics. They're a small player, honestly. And India, the charts do suggest that India foreign relations will continue to be strong over this decade. And I'm not really concerned that. See, one thing is, I do expect that India will conduct covert operations against terrorists who are working for against any being. So I will be some covert operations in outside of India shores. So for all you know, India may have done or may do in future some covert operations in Canada or Europe. But the thing is, these things are handled behind the scenes. And if somebody really has a proof for it, they should basically negotiate and use that proof as a leverage in making some deals behind closed doors. Justin Trudeau, from that point of view, what Justin Trudeau did was not really a wise thing, and that is very clear from his chart. He's under tremendous duress for the last several months and for the next few months. He's under tremendously bad transits. He's under duress, lot of turmoil. He just could not deal with it and made a bad decision. He made a bad call. But one thing I can say is, even if, and one more thing, it is quite possible that some of the intelligence that came may have come from US initially, but it doesn't mean US wanted to throw India under bus, because there are some people who have this theory that US wants to throw India under bus and US is proactively sharing this intelligence and US is anti-India. Like I said earlier, there will be some forces within US deep state that are anti-India, that are working against the current Indian administration and also working towards India's weakening. So it is possible that some data was shared by them with Canada, but the intention of the top leadership of US is not really to cause a public spat between Canada and India. It is basically to create some leverage so that Canada investigates and gets some leverage to negotiate some deals with India. And this did not pan out the way those forces wanted. But the one thing I can say astrologically, India will not be under trouble. This will not really become a problem for India. India's foreign relations will continue to be strong through this year, through the next year, and through the next few years. And India will continue to be assertive and aggressive, and other countries will respect India. So, and also looking at Canada, Canada's charts don't look good for the next few years. Canada has a lot of turmoil in their own homeland, unfortunately. So Canada has their own troubles to sort out. So I expect that this issue, which became a big headline news a couple of weeks back, is just a non-issue. It will become a non-issue over time. Even if there is some proof Canada or US has against India, it will not basically be used to embarrass India publicly. It will basically be just buried behind closed doors, and then India and US will continue to become closer. One more thing is, as I said earlier, India-US partnership will grow through this decade, and it will be the defining partnership, just like the US-UK partnership in the World War II was the defining partnership in World War II. Similarly, basically, I see India as what US was in 1940s in the second World War. So India-US partnership is destined to grow. So these small distractions will not cause any problems. This relationship will grow strong. India will be fine. And as a matter of fact, the focus on Khalistani movement, which is practically non-existent in India, and mostly it exists only in Canada. So it may become a problem for Justin Trudeau over the next couple of years. So overall, my conclusion is India is fine. Don't worry about India. It is Canada that needs to worry, and Canada will have a lot of troubles in the coming years.
Can Canada disintegrate also? Can there be another country called Khalistan in Canada? Because there have
I
been
have,
earlier.
I don't have an opinion on that. Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry. I don't have an opinion on that. I don't want to speak about disintegration of Canada, but the thing is, one thing I can say is Canada will have lot of challenges for the next few decades, economic challenges and unrest in the country. And also, even though Canada is a very progressive country, very left-wing country compared to US, uh, the left wing will face severe challenges because of some aggressive steps they have taken in the last uh, few years. They'll face huge backlash, and the conservatives will become stronger. So basically, there will be political polarization along the lines you see in US right now. There will be political polarization, and Justin Trudeau will have a fight of his life to be re-elected in the next election. Basically, he's running. He's having Sade Sati, the 7.5 years of Saturn troubles, and some severe Saturn problems. So he will have his own challenges to deal with. So he wanted to use India as a as a leverage, not leverage, but basically he wanted to distract. Basically, he wanted to use India as a distraction to get out of his troubles, and it did not work. India will not. India Nobody can use India as a distraction because India will just hammer them. He realizes it now, but he still has all those unresolved headaches that he needs to deal with over the next couple of years.
Sir,
That's what.
right in the beginning of video, you said that the planets are stationed in a way that they were stationed during the Mahabharat. So during Mahabharat,
During the
Kurukshetra, which is
oh yeah, yeah,
Mahabharat,
Mahabharat, yeah, yeah.
the planet,
Not now, but 2030, late 2030, you will have similar
so similar positioning of the planets. So
Mhm.
that time Kurukshetra was the center, Mahabharat
Yeah,
war.
yeah.
So like now, which place will it be? Middle East, because everything seems to be going around in Middle East only.
Most likely Middle East, but I don't really have an intelligent opinion on it astrologically. I'm afraid there'll be multiple fronts in which there'll be a big fight brewing, and how those fronts converge and way, which will become the main theater of main epicenter. I'm not 100% sure, but looking at the annual charts of various countries, what I said like 20 years back is that when there is a major war in the 2030 period, the Middle East and Iran area, Middle East to all the way up to Iran, that will be the epicenter of main theater of that war. But the thing is, it's not. It's a indirect conclusion based on the annual charts of various countries. There's no clear technique that allows us to find what will be the theater of war.
Sir, and these two angles which you mentioned, on one side will be Iran, Turkey, Qatar, Russia, China. Other will be USA, Israel, UK, NATO, India. All the countries of
I'm
Europe
not
and Africa.
100% sure of Qatar, Turkey, etc. I need to study them closely. But one thing I'm sure of is that Axis will involve Iran. Main players are China and Russia, of course. China and Russia, then Iran and North Korea. Those four will definitely be part of that Axis. Who else joins them, whether it's Turkey or Qatar, that I'm still to weigh in on. But these four will definitely be there. On the other side, US, allies of US like NATO, Israel and India, they will definitely be there. Who else will join? For example, Australia may join because we have the Quad, US, Australia, India, and Japan coalition. Though it started as a financial, economic forum, it may slowly become more militaristic. So Australia and Japan may also join, but I haven't really studied that closely. But these three countries mainly, US, Israel, and India, these are destined to get close to each other and be on the winning side in the coming war.
And these are the countries which actually, if I look at ideology wise, is Muslim, Islam, and communist countries. Russia, China, both communist, then
Yeah.
Islam. It's like the those two ideologies will be which have been supporting each other through thick and thin, being one each other's protector, are going to be defeated towards 2030. If I look at it in a very broad way.
Yes. Unfortunately, we can see some coming together of the communist ideologies and some of the jihadi ideologies over the last couple of decades, and I'm afraid it will become more solidified, more consolidated over the next few years. But the thing is, at the end of this war, I don't want to leave on a negative note. At the end of this war, when there'll be tremendous destruction, lot of lives lost, which is unfortunate. But the thing is, after that, the peace that comes will be more sustainable and more dharmic. It will be based on not communism but capitalism, but not really the mindless capitalism that we had in the last few decades, but a more dharmic capitalism where you uh, basically dharma has a concept of fairness inherently built in it. So it is fair, but not by force, basically, not by somebody equalizing, somebody basically engineering the society, doing social engineering. But basically, uh, people will be more fair, and there will be more rewards for being fair. I don't really have a clear idea of what it will be, but we'll have a more along the lines of what we had in India a millennium or couple of millennia before ago. So that kind of uh, uh, rule will come across the world, and that will be basically after this war. So even though, and also people will be more religious, not necessarily following one religion. You can follow Christianity, you can follow Hinduism, you can follow Judaism. You can go back to older religions, pagan religions that existed before the religions of Kali Yuga, as I call Christianity and Islam came and replaced them. So those religions can basically come back again across the world. And from my perspective, they are all part of the large umbrella of Sanatana Dharma. So various pagan religions may come. So overall, Sanatana Dharma will flourish across the world. And another aspect is environmental awareness. People have destroyed environment over the last few decades, and what comes after this will be a way of life which is more nature friendly, which is more attuned to nature, like was the case before industrial revolution. Before a couple of millennia back, there were various civilizations across the world that lived in harmony with nature. So there will be more elements of that in the aftermath of the major war. But one thing I want to point out is when I say environment matters, the climate crisis is real. I know that some friends on the right wing will oppose, because right now, especially in US, it is very popular in the right wing to say that, oh, climax is just a hoax. The thing is, climate is hoax. Climate crisis is a hoax. Climate crisis is real. But the thing is, what the left wing in US is doing is fake. Basically, they are not really putting any real solutions on the table. They are just using it to push fake solutions that cause more problems than solve any problems. On the other hand, some in the right wing refuse to believe that there is a global climate crisis. But the thing is, there is a global climate crisis, and this also will benefit from the geopolitical change that is coming in the next decade.
So you mentioned about paganism. Even I, sometime back, I did a video on paganism. It's already started. It's already started erupting in Britain itself. The paganism, secret societies, they have started coming while the churches are being on sale. Because they're not able to even take out the running cost of the churches. Nobody's visiting them, especially the children who have been born after 2000, year 2000. So those signs can be seen across world, I guess.
Yes, but they're all really weak right now. Basically, when something happens in a particular place, it is shown as a headline news, so we are aware of it. But it's not like a good percentage of people are following those traditions. It's still a niche audience. It's still a very small percentage of the audience. So there are a lot of countries across Europe where these traditions were really strong, and in Africa, in South America, even in North America, the native Indian traditions. So some of these traditions existed, especially Europe, Africa, and South America. These were very strong over the last several millennia. But these are, like you correctly said, these are making a comeback. But this is just for the news, not for the mainstream. There's no mainstream acceptance yet. It's basically a small percentage of people who have independent thinking who are doing this. But what I think is, what I expect is, based on some really long-term charts, what I expect is the faith in certain popular religions that arose in Kali Yuga will become weaker and weaker over the coming decade. People will become more agnostic, and then some of these pagan religions will give them solace. They will seem more logical than some of the modern religions that have replaced them, sometimes by force. over the last couple of millennia. So I do expect that these will come back, and it is a good time for Hindus to, instead of fighting them, basically embrace them and accept them as a part of the large umbrella of Sanatana Dharma, because they were. If you look at various of these traditions that existed across the world, you basically see that some of the traditions have similarities, some of even the symbolism of various gods and goddesses have some similarities, even some stories have some similarities. So my thinking is the Sanatana Dharma spread across the world in old days, and then after a major war, let's say 5,000 years back, connections were cut off, and basically there were islands of various practices, islands of knowledge with specific practices. So basically they evolved separately. That is why there are some similarities as well as some dissimilarities. So it is a good time for Hindus to take lead and accept everybody into the umbrella and become the leader.
And sir, I'll ask two very pointed questions. Russia-Ukraine war. Russia will win the war. It looks like that. It's already, I mean, already there. So it will win the war. And will Gaza will be gone from the world's map?
My expectation is, even though the popular mainstream convention right now, because US will be distracted with the Israel Gaza war, Ukraine basically, and also there is a deadlock in the US Congress, and they could not agree to basically fund Ukraine war. The conventional wisdom is that Ukraine is going to lose the war very soon, but I will not be surprised if a way is found to basically get out of this situation, and the Ukraine war keeps simmering and keeps remains as a front developing into the 2030 war. So I will not be surprised if it continues as a proxy war, and it's not just a couple of weeks of closure as some experts and some conventional wisdom is saying right now. I'm not convinced that it is done. It's a done deal. I'm afraid that it may seem like a done deal, but it may come back. If you look at Afghanistan war or Iraq war, it seemed like it was a done deal, but basically it came back. It's like water under the mat. If you push water under the mat, it will basically come up from another location. So I'm afraid that this front will continue to be active, even though it may become inactive for a while. It will become active again. So this front will remain. This proxy war, I'm afraid, is not done yet. And as far as Gaza is concerned, what I expect is a quick victory for Israel, but other forces basically being involved, and this basically remaining active for a long time. I expect that this will be another forever war, just like Ukraine has been a forever war. This will be another forever war, and this will result in a lot of losses for Israel as well as their opponents. And many players will eventually get involved in this war, and this will remain an active theater, an active front for the 2030 situation. That is my expectation, unfortunately.
Okay. So what will happen to Africa when all this turmoil is going on and
I
all
haven't
this
really focused on
geopolitics?
Africa. I will try to look at Africa for future videos. Haven't looked at Africa.
And so this is something I'm asking because it's been going on social media through a lot of videos and everything. Makkah has shivling of Shivji. Obviously Shivji. Makkah has shivling, number one, and the Middle East is Gandhari's curse from Mahabharata time. This is like, how do you see these two? Ji sir.
I don't have an opinion on Mecca, but it's an interesting theory. As far as Gandhari's curse is really for the Afghanistan Iran area, because Gandhar Desha of the Mahabharata times was basically the capital was what is today known as Kandahar. That's basically a change of Kandahar. So Kandahar was the capital, and basically it spanned across Iran, Afghanistan, etc. So that area has simmered in crisis for a long time, and I expect, so forgetting about the curse, but basically based on astrology, I expect that the way all the way from Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, all the way till Israel to Gaza, this whole area, their annual charts and long-term charts do show a lot of destruction in this decade. So unfortunately, there'll be a lot of loss of life and loss of property in that place over the next decade. Whether it is because of a particular curse or not, it is tough to judge. But remember another thing: apart from such a curse, karma is real. Whatever you do will come back to you. So if a particular place was involved in using violence against other places for whatever reason, to spread a religion or to spread an empire, if a particular place used a lot of violence against other places, eventually violence will come to you. And if you basically cause the ruin of some places, some other place will cause the ruin of you. So karma is real, and you basically get back what you sow, you reap what you sow. So and what astrology does is it shows when you sow what you reap, when you reap what you sow. So I'm afraid the charts do suggest that there is tremendous suffering for that area, all the way from the Palestine Israel area till Afghanistan area. That whole area is destined to suffer over this decade.
Thank you so much, sir, for joining. Sir also has a channel and he has a Twitter link in the description box and also in the chat section. I will pin both the links so that people can follow Sir and see his, because he makes a lot of predictions even on his channel from time to time. So thank you so much, sir, for joining. जाने से पहले सभी viewers से request है, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the All Take Media. If you want to contribute, you want to support, you want to send a feedback, all the links are given in the description box. इसी के साथ जय हिंद, जय श्री राम, हर हर महादेव.
शुक्रिया, धन्यवाद, नमस्कार.